Elijah had always dreamed of sharing his art with the world. For years, his studio, a cramped apartment in the heart of the city, had been both his sanctuary and his prison. The peeling paint on the walls and the faint smell of turpentine reminded him daily of his struggles. But amidst the chaos, his canvases stood as silent witnesses to his passion, each one alive with bold strokes and vibrant colors that spoke of resilience, hope, and identity. On a crisp autumn morning, with his portfolio tucked under his arm, Elijah decided to take a leap of faith. His destination was Thorn Gallery, an elegant establishment known for showcasing contemporary masterpieces. Its pristine white facade and floor-to-ceiling windows exuded sophistication, drawing the city's elite like moths to a flame. Elijah had spent weeks rehearsing what he would say, convincing himself that this was the moment his life could change. As he stepped inside, the faint sound of classical music and the scent of fresh flowers enveloped him. The gallery was immaculate, with polished marble floors that reflected the opulent chandeliers above. Elijah's eyes scanned the room, taking in the curated displays of paintings and sculptures, each one bearing a price tag worth more than he had made in the last year. Behind the sleek reception desk stood Miss Thorne, the gallery owner. She was the epitome of refinement, dressed in a tailored black suit with a string of pearls resting gracefully on her collarbone. Her expression was a careful blend of disinterest and superiority, as though she were above the very art she sold. Elijah approached her with a nervous smile. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "My name is Elijah Miller. I'm an artist, and I was hoping to show you my work." Miss Thorne barely looked up from her tablet. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her tone clipped and dismissive. "No, but Then I'm afraid we're fully booked," she interrupted, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes flickered to his worn jacket and scuffed shoes, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "We represent established artists here, Mr. Miller. Not amateurs." Elijah felt the heat rise to his cheeks. "If you could just take a look at my portfolio." Miss Thorne raised a manicured hand to stop him. "Let me be frank," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't the kind of place where you can walk in off the street and expect to be taken seriously. Our clients expect a certain standard, and frankly, you don't fit the image." Her words hit him like a slap. For a moment, Elijah was too stunned to respond. He glanced around the room, noticing the subtle glances from a few patrons who had overheard the exchange. Embarrassment and anger churned inside him, but he swallowed them both. "I see," he said quietly, clutching his portfolio tighter. "Thank you for your time." As Elijah turned to leave, Miss Thorne called after him, her tone almost mocking. "Good luck out there. You'll need it." Stepping back onto the bustling street, Elijah took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mix of humiliation and determination. The world outside felt colder now, but he refused to let her words define him. "This isn't the end," he muttered to himself, his grip on the portfolio tightening. "One day, they'll see my worth." With his head held high, Elijah walked away, vowing to channel the sting of rejection into his art. Little did Miss Thorne know, the man she had dismissed so easily would soon become the name on everyone's lips, a name she would come to regret underestimating. The sting of rejection from Thorn Gallery had left Elijah shaken, but not broken. If anything, it ignited a fire within him, a fierce determination to prove his worth as an artist. For weeks, he poured himself into his work, spending long nights in his tiny apartment, surrounded by canvases and paint-streaked brushes. His art took on a raw, unfiltered quality, each stroke reflecting his defiance, resilience, and a story he knew the world needed to hear. His best friend, Naomi, had been one of his few unwavering supporters. A tech-savvy marketing professional with a sharp eye for trends, Naomi had been urging Elijah to embrace the digital world for years. "Elijah," she said one evening over coffee, "if these gallery snobs won't give you a chance, make your own space. Post your work online. Let the people see what they're missing." At first, Elijah hesitated. The idea of showcasing his deeply personal pieces to a faceless audience was daunting. But Naomi's words stuck with him. One rainy afternoon, as he stared at his latest painting, a sprawling, emotional piece depicting a young boy standing tall amidst a chaotic storm, he made up his mind. With Naomi's help, Elijah created an account on a popular social media platform, uploading high-resolution photos of his work alongside heartfelt captions explaining the stories behind each piece. At first, the response was modest, likes trickled in, and a few kind comments encouraged him to keep going. Then, everything changed. One evening, as Elijah was sketching in his living room, his phone buzzed with a notification. Then another. And another. Within minutes, his screen was lighting up with activity. Confused, he opened the app to find that a renowned art critic, Julian Marks, had shared one of his paintings. Raw, evocative, and deeply human, the critic had written. Elijah Miller is an artist the world needs to know. The post went viral overnight. Thousands of people began flocking to Elijah's page, drawn to the raw emotion and vibrant energy of his work. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, many of them sharing how his art had moved them. "This piece reminds me of my childhood," one wrote. Another said, "I've never seen anything so powerful. Where can I buy this?" Naomi called him the next morning, her voice bursting with excitement. "Elijah, you're trending everywhere. Your followers doubled overnight, and I just got an email from a gallery in New York asking about your work." From that moment, Elijah's life transformed. Collectors, galleries, and media outlets began reaching out, each one eager to learn more about the artist who had captured the world's attention. Elijah's inbox was flooded with offers, everything from exclusive gallery showcases to interviews with prominent magazines. But the biggest moment came when one of his pieces, The Storm Within, was selected for auction by a prestigious art house. The event was held in a grand venue, filled with well-dressed bidders and art enthusiasts. Elijah sat nervously in the back row, his hands clasped tightly as the auctioneer introduced his work. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, "we present The Storm Within, a masterpiece by rising artist Elijah Miller. We'll start the bidding at $50,000. Elijah's heart nearly stopped at the starting price. But the room erupted with paddles raising higher and higher as collectors competed fiercely for the piece. 70,000. 80. 95. The numbers climbed rapidly, the energy in the room electric. When the final bid was called at a staggering $1.2 million, the room burst into applause. Elijah sat in stunned silence, tears welling up as the weight of the moment hit him. That night, headlines declared him the art world's newest sensation. The once dismissed artist had not only proven his worth but shattered every expectation. Elijah celebrated the milestone with Naomi, who toasted him with a glass of champagne. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "No," Elijah replied, a small smile on his lips. "We did it. And this is just the beginning." As he looked out at the city skyline that night, Elijah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had turned rejection into a revolution, and he wasn't just an artist anymore, he was a voice for those who had been overlooked and underestimated, just as he had once been. Elijah's success was nothing short of meteoric. In the months following the record-breaking sale of The Storm Within, his name became synonymous with innovation and authenticity in the art world. Invitations flooded in from every corner of the globe, exclusive gallery showcases in Paris, a feature at the Venice Biennale, and even commissions from major brands seeking to infuse his unique storytelling into their campaigns. His art was no longer just a reflection of his struggles, it had become a movement. People resonated with his work, not only for its beauty but for the raw, unfiltered emotions it evoked. Critics lauded him as the voice of a generation, and collectors scrambled to acquire his pieces, often at jaw-dropping prices. With fame came wealth, more money than Elijah had ever imagined. But instead of indulging in the excesses many might expect, he chose to use his newfound fortune with purpose. Memories of the hardships he'd endured as an artist remained fresh in his mind, and he vowed to create opportunities for others who shared his story. Elijah established the Miller Foundation for Emerging Artists, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting underrepresented creatives. The foundation offered grants, studio spaces, and mentorship programs to those who struggled to find a platform. Elijah also began investing in real estate, purchasing rundown warehouses and transforming them into vibrant community art centers. These spaces became hubs for creativity, providing artists with the resources and exposure they needed to thrive. One of his most ambitious projects was the acquisition of a historic building in the heart of the city. The building, once an abandoned relic, was reborn as the Phoenix Gallery, a sprawling, state-of-the-art exhibition space dedicated to showcasing diverse voices from around the world. At its grand opening, Elijah stood on stage before a packed audience, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "This gallery," he said, "is not just a space for art. It's a space for stories, stories that deserve to be heard, just as mine once did. To every artist who has ever been told you don't belong, this place is for you." The audience erupted in applause, and Elijah felt a swell of pride. But there was one final chapter in his transformation that he knew had to be written, a return to the place where his journey had begun. The Thorn Gallery. Elijah had avoided it for years, not out of fear, but because he wanted to wait for the right moment. Now, as one of the most sought-after artists in the world, that moment had come. Dressed in a tailored suit that exuded quiet confidence, Elijah arrived at the gallery on a sunny afternoon. The familiar white facade loomed before him, unchanged since the day he had been dismissed by its owner. But this time, Elijah was different. Inside, the gallery was as pristine as he remembered, the walls adorned with carefully curated pieces. Miss Thorne, still as impeccably dressed as ever, was speaking with a client when she noticed him. Her gaze flickered with recognition, though she didn't immediately place him. "Welcome to Thorn Gallery," she said, her tone polished and professional. "How may I assist you?" Elijah's smile was calm, almost amused. "Good afternoon, Miss Thorne. I'm here to discuss a potential acquisition." Her eyes narrowed slightly, trying to discern who he was. Then it hit her. Her mouth opened slightly, a flicker of shock crossing her face. "Mr. Miller," she stammered. Oh, it's been a long time." "Yes, it has," Elijah replied, his tone measured. "Last time I was here, I believe you told me I didn't fit the image of your gallery." Miss Thorne's cheeks flushed, and she began to fumble for words. I hope you understand. We have very high standards, and sometimes, things can be misinterpreted." Elijah let her words hang in the air, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, he said, "I'm not here to dwell on the past. I'm here because I'm interested in buying this gallery." The color drained from her face. "Buying?" "Yes," Elijah said, his voice steady. "I believe this space has potential, but it needs a new direction, a vision that embraces diversity and inclusivity. I'd like to turn it into a gallery where emerging artists can have their voices heard." Miss Thorne stared at him, speechless. She knew she had no choice but to agree. The gallery, though prestigious, had been struggling in recent years, and Elijah's name alone could revive it. After a long pause, she nodded. "If that's what you want, Mr. Miller, I'm willing to sell." The deal was finalized within weeks. As Elijah walked through the gallery one last time as a visitor, he felt a sense of closure. This was no longer the place of rejection and humiliation it had once been. It was now a symbol of transformation, a testament to how far he had come and the legacy he was building. When the gallery reopened under its new name, the Mosaic Space, it was packed with artists, collectors, and admirers from all walks of life. Elijah stood at the entrance, welcoming each guest with the same warmth he had once yearned for. As the night drew on, he couldn't help but smile. He had turned pain into purpose, and in doing so, had become not just an artist but a beacon of hope for countless others. The grand reopening of the Mosaic Space was only days away. Invitations had been sent to the city's most influential art collectors, critics, and gallery owners. Among them, one name stood out, Miss Thorne. Elijah had insisted on inviting her, not out of spite, but to confront the past and bring his journey full circle. On the evening of the event, the gallery was alive with energy. The once intimidating white walls of the former Thorn Gallery now pulsed with color and life, adorned with artwork from diverse, emerging artists. The crowd was a mix of established figures in the art world and fresh faces, precisely the inclusivity Elijah had envisioned. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit and exuding quiet confidence, Elijah moved through the room, greeting guests. As he spoke with an aspiring artist, he noticed a familiar figure entering the gallery. Miss Thorne had arrived. She looked as polished as ever, her pearl necklace and designer dress catching the gallery's soft lighting. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, and Elijah could see the faintest flicker of unease on her face. The gallery she had once owned was now transformed into something unrecognizable, a vibrant celebration of art that defied her narrow standards. Miss Thorne didn't immediately notice Elijah. Instead, she approached a nearby exhibit and admired a painting by a young artist from Ghana. The bold, expressive strokes caught her attention, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Elijah decided it was time. He walked over, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" he said, his voice calm and measured. She turned, her eyes landing on him. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, as realization dawned, her carefully composed expression faltered. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice tinged with hesitation. I didn't realize you were here." "I would hope so," Elijah replied with a faint smile. "After all, this is my gallery now." Her eyes widened slightly, and she glanced around, taking in the space with a new perspective. "Your gallery?" she echoed, the words heavy with disbelief. "That's right," Elijah said, folding his hands in front of him. "I purchased it a few months ago. I wanted to give it a new direction, one that embraces the kind of artists who might have been overlooked before." The weight of his words hung in the air. Miss Thorne's face flushed as the memory of their first encounter resurfaced. She opened her mouth, searching for something to say. "Mr. Miller," she began, her tone suddenly warm and ingratiating. "I must say, this transformation is remarkable. You've done an incredible job here." "Truly." Elijah raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Miss Thorne," he said. "But I seem to recall a time when you didn't think I had what it takes to belong in a gallery like this." Her cheeks turned a deeper shade of red. I hope you understand," she stammered, "that wasn't personal. It was just business. We had certain standards to uphold, and sometimes difficult decisions had to be made." Elijah regarded her for a long moment. Then, in a voice steady and resonant, he said, "Miss Thorne, your rejection was one of the most personal things I've ever experienced. You didn't just dismiss my art, you dismissed me. You made assumptions about my worth based on appearances and your own narrow definition of what talent should look like. But you know what? That rejection was a gift." The crowd around them began to quiet as Elijah's voice carried through the room. People turned to listen, their eyes fixed on the artist who had defied the odds. "Your dismissal pushed me to work harder, to believe in my own vision even when others didn't. It taught me that talent doesn't need validation from gatekeepers. And it showed me that the art world doesn't have to be a place of exclusivity, it can be a place of opportunity and diversity." Miss Thorne looked around, aware of the growing audience. Her discomfort was palpable, but Elijah's gaze remained steady. "I'm not here to hold grudges," Elijah continued, his tone softening slightly. "I'm here because I want to change the way things are done. This gallery isn't just a space for art, it's a space for people who've been told no one too many times. It's a space for stories that deserve to be heard, just like mine." The room erupted into applause, the sound reverberating off the walls. Miss Thorne, now visibly humbled, nodded slowly. "You've built something extraordinary, Mr. Miller," she said quietly. "And I can see now that I was wrong to underestimate you." Elijah gave her a small nod, his expression softening. "I appreciate that, Miss Thorne. But the real credit belongs to the artists who filled this space with their passion and talent. They're the future of the art world." With that, Elijah turned his attention back to the crowd, leaving Miss Thorne to reflect on her own role in his journey. As he moved through the gallery, greeting guests and sharing stories, he felt a profound sense of closure. The confrontation wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming his narrative. Elijah had turned the pain of rejection into a platform for empowerment, proving that true talent cannot be ignored, no matter how many doors are closed along the way. The morning after the grand opening of the Mosaic space, Elijah found himself seated at his desk, reviewing a proposal that had been sent to him. It was from Miss Thorne. Despite the applause and recognition he had received the night before, Elijah couldn't stop thinking about her reaction during their encounter. There was something in her expression, a mix of regret and longing, that hinted at a woman grappling with her past mistakes. Her email confirmed it. "Mr. Miller," it began, "your words last night resonated deeply with me. I have spent much of my career upholding standards that, in hindsight, were exclusionary and narrow. I see now that art should reflect the diversity of humanity, not the preferences of a privileged few. I'd like to meet and discuss how I can support your vision for the future." Elijah stared at the email for a long moment before deciding to respond. He wasn't entirely sure what Ms. Thorne's intentions were, but he believed in second chances. After all, hadn't his own life been a series of second chances? They met the following week at a cafe near the gallery. Miss Thorne was uncharacteristically subdued, her usual air of superiority replaced with quiet humility. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. "I owe you an apology, not just for the way I treated you, but for the way I've treated so many others over the years. I built my gallery on the idea of exclusivity, but I see now how much that mindset has cost, not just the artists I've overlooked, but the art world itself." Elijah listened carefully, noting the sincerity in her voice. "Acknowledging that is the first step," he said. "But what do you want to do about it?" Miss Thorne hesitated for a moment before responding. "I want to help you. I know this space, your space, has the potential to change lives. I have connections, resources, and experience that could be useful in making the Mosaic space a lasting success. If you'll let me, I'd like to be a part of it." Elijah leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Partnering with the very person who had once dismissed him seemed like an ironic twist of fate, but he couldn't deny the potential benefits of her offer. After a long pause, he nodded. "If you're serious about this, we can try. But this partnership has to be about more than redemption, it has to be about creating something truly meaningful." From that day forward, Miss Thorne became an unexpected ally. Together, they worked to expand the Mosaic space, transforming it into a beacon for emerging talent. Miss Thorne leveraged her extensive network to attract donors and patrons, while Elijah focused on curating exhibitions that showcased artists from all walks of life. The gallery became a hub of activity, hosting workshops, mentorship programs, and community events. Aspiring artists who had once been overlooked found a platform to share their work with the world. Pieces that celebrated cultural heritage, personal struggles, and unique perspectives filled the walls, creating an atmosphere that was both inclusive and inspiring. Months later, the gallery hosted its most ambitious event yet, a showcase titled Voices Unbound, featuring over 50 artists from underrepresented backgrounds. The opening night was a spectacle of creativity and celebration. The gallery was packed with visitors, from local art enthusiasts to international collectors, all eager to witness the transformation of the Mosaic space. Elijah stood by the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. He spotted Ms. Thorne across the room, guiding a group of collectors through the exhibits. She was a different woman now, no longer the gatekeeper she had once been, but an advocate for the very artists she had once dismissed. As the night drew to a close, Miss Thorne approached Elijah, a rare smile on her face. "This is extraordinary," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "You've created something truly special here." "We created it," Elijah corrected her. "This wouldn't have been possible without both of us working together." She nodded, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and humility. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make amends. I'll never take it for granted." Elijah smiled. "It's not just about making amends, it's about building something better." and we're just getting started." As the final guests departed and the gallery quieted, Elijah walked through the exhibits, taking in the diverse array of stories captured in each piece. For the first time in a long time, he felt a profound sense of peace. The gallery wasn't just a testament to his journey, it was a symbol of hope and transformation, a place where dreams could flourish and voices could be heard. And as Elijah stood in the center of the mosaic space, he knew that this was his greatest masterpiece yet. Months turned into years, and the mosaic space grew into a cornerstone of the art world, revered not only for its groundbreaking exhibitions but for its mission to elevate voices that had long been silenced. Under Elijah's leadership, the gallery became more than a physical space, it was a movement that inspired change across the industry. Through partnerships with schools, nonprofits, and international art organizations, the mosaic space expanded its reach. It launched an annual program, the Emerging Artists Fellowship, which provided funding, mentorship, and exhibition opportunities to artists from underserved communities around the globe. Elijah made it a personal mission to visit these communities, often traveling to remote villages, urban neighborhoods, and refugee camps to discover talent that might otherwise go unnoticed. Ms. Thorne, now fully immersed in the gallery's mission, became one of its most ardent advocates. She used her connections to secure funding, organize high-profile events, and lobby for more equitable representation in other galleries and museums. Though she had started as a figure of controversy, her transformation was genuine, and over time, she earned the respect of those who had once dismissed her. The gallery's crowning achievement came with the Mosaic International Biennale, a global art festival that showcased hundreds of artists from diverse backgrounds. Held across multiple venues in the city, the Biennale attracted tens of thousands of visitors and solidified the mosaic space as a beacon for inclusivity and innovation in the art world. Elijah's personal life also flourished during this time. He remained grounded, often returning to the humble beginnings that had shaped him. His studio, though now much larger and better equipped, still held the same spirit of creativity and resilience. He continued to paint, his works evolving to reflect not just his personal journey but the collective stories of the artists he supported. One evening, during a gala celebrating the 5th anniversary of the mosaic space, Elijah found himself reflecting on how far things had come. The gallery was buzzing with energy, filled with artists, collectors, and patrons from every corner of the world. Naomi, his lifelong friend and now the gallery's chief operations officer, approached him with a glass of champagne. "Take a moment to look around," she said, gesturing to the lively crowd. "This is all because of you." Elijah shook his head, smiling. "This is because of all of us," he replied. "Every artist who believed in their voice, every person who supported this vision, and every obstacle that pushed us to be better." As the evening progressed, Elijah was asked to give a speech. Standing on the stage, he gazed at the sea of faces before him, artists, friends, allies, and even Miss Thorne, who stood near the front, her eyes filled with pride. "When I started this journey," Elijah began, his voice steady, "I never imagined it would lead here. This gallery began as a dream, a response to rejection and a desire to prove that talent has no boundaries. But what we've built together is so much more than that. The mosaic space is not just a gallery, it's a testament to the power of art to bring people together, to tell stories, and to transform lives." The room erupted into applause, and Elijah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. As the celebration continued, he stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The city stretched before him, alive with light and possibility. He thought of his younger self, the boy with a portfolio in his hand and a dream in his heart, and smiled. The legacy of the mosaic space was secure, but Elijah knew there was still work to be done. Art had the power to change the world, and he was determined to keep pushing boundaries, one story, one artist, and one brushstroke at a time.